Well, thank you so much for joining us. I'm Mark Schumacher, CEO of the Home Furnishings Association, and on behalf of all of us here, I welcome you to our latest in our webinar series. And once again, today we have chosen a subject that, if it's not on your mind, it should be. This is about profitability strategies to create some financial resilience for you, which just basically means today we want to make sure that we arm you with everything that helps you keep the doors open, keep the money flow coming in, and you can actually grow in the midst of all this craziness that we're dealing with. But before we start, I want to just mention a couple of things. At the bottom of your screen, you'll notice a Q&A tab. Click on that, put a question in there. If you have a question for us, we'll do our best to get to all the questions. We have a number of them that came in prior to, but we want to make sure that we take care of those as well. And always remember, myhfa.org/webinar. You go there, you're going to find this webinar there tomorrow, but also everything else in our library. There's not a subject matter that relates to your business and your success that you will not find there. myhfa.org/webinar, and you'll be good to go. So let me get right into it. We've got a lot to talk about today. I want to squeeze a lot into this hour. So let me introduce you to our panel. First of all, we have Daniel Loebner joining us. He's the CEO of Clive Daniel. They are a 4-store top 100 retailer down in Florida, and he knows an awful lot about innovation and about planning and strategies and things like that. So we're going to certainly be tapping into Daniel's brain. So Daniel, thank you for being here. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Mark.
Also, we have Mark Evans here. He's the COO of Evans Furniture Galleries. It's a family-owned business in Northern California. They've got 4 stores as well. Mark's an interesting cat because he didn't just stick with the family business. He went and spent some time in the Coast Guard and then came back in and really has done a lot. And I know this from conversations with him and their family and everything. He's done a lot to really transform their business. So Mark, we're glad to have you here as well. And Reed Bork is joining us. He's the Chief Revenue Officer for Catapult. He leads sales, marketing, client success, partnership, and everything. And I think that he's really going to help a lot as we talk about things like profitability and cost cutting and things like that. So we've got 3 really good approaches to this subject. So guys, it's good to have you here. It's always hard to figure out where you start, right, with a broad subject matter like this, but that's actually my first question. So Daniel, when we talk about things like profitability strategies and how we sort of manage going forward, where do you start? Where do you as a business owner start that whole process? What are the things that you want to know right out of the gates?
Well, that's a pretty big question to start with. It could probably take up the full hour to dig into it. But like we were chatting about before the webinar officially started, it's having a plan, it's having a strategy. Profitability comes down to buying at the right price and being able to sell at the right price. But in between those 2 variables is a pretty wide delta. So it's not only selling at the right price, but what are we doing with the inventory that's non-sellable or returned? What's the carry cost to stick it in the racks? Do we have the right people in the right places? How is our media approach being affected to tripping the Rubicon and getting clients to walk in the front door? How is the presentation of the front door? What CapEx do we need to set aside? Make sure that when people are coming in, they're having a really wonderful experience. Down to those extra costs, running a wine bar in our showroom as one of those differentiating factors, or baking the cookies, or making sure that the uniforms are up to date on the guys on the truck. So I can't answer that question, but
You did. You just did, and you answered it exactly the way I was hoping for, because we need to understand, and Mark, I'm going to let you take it from here with this next piece of this, is that it is everything, right? We can't sit here and say there's one magic bullet here that is the thing that's going to turn me into profitability here. What Daniel's talking about is everything he's talked about is soup to nuts, being really aware of every aspect of the business. Is that fair? And you tell me how you would also define where you start.
Yeah, I think that Daniel hit a lot of our points as well. And we recognize that things were changing rapidly. And obviously right now, the biggest risk is, in my opinion, the status quo. One thing we did is we held a full-fledged SWOT analysis with all of our senior leadership. And then we also brought up some rank and file employees to hold a SWOT analysis and develop a bit of a strategic plan. And we were able to break it down into pieces and kind of identify some KPIs and some specific areas to focus. And one of the biggest things for us, one of my biggest focuses is capturing existing customers. We kind of got used to having a fire hose of customers, and now we're realizing that every customer is incredibly valuable to us when we invest so much in getting them through the door that I've realized that we were not necessarily maximizing that opportunity. And so we've come up with some really good strategies to maximize every interaction and then convert those. And then even customers that don't close, and putting some new measures and practices into place to continue following up and carrying those customers through until they were actually ready to make a purchase.
So Reed, jump in here, because I mean, we're talking about, with two business owners here that understand that this whole question of profitability runs the range of just about anything. I mean, when you're talking to somebody that's looking for advice in this area, where do you suggest that they start? Is it a SWOT analysis? Is it just, really just as Daniel's doing, it's like going almost department by department? What do you suggest?
Well, I mean, it's so challenging in this environment, business planning, because it is so dynamic. I think one of the areas that can be really impactful is ensuring that every employee understands how their contribution and their efforts impact profitability, and that the things that they do that may impact costs and or may drive revenue, and that can go down to the rank and file employee. And I think that's so critical, that education piece. So I a lot of times that's where I see successful people starting is at a executive level. I think people understand it and they understand what's going on, but making sure every employee understands, and that then influences their decision-making process and how they can help drive the bottom line.
Daniel, do you do that? Is that something that you do?
Yeah. So, a good best practice that we have here, call a profit share, call it year-end bonuses, it's kind of the same thing, is making sure that people understand what they are doing in their departments to achieve a best practice. Connecting all the dots, the guy who picks the piece in the warehouse, and then the person who opens the box, assembles the furniture, loads the truck, and delivers. That's a team. So when that team is successful, we're able to again add some level of recognition or remuneration to that team. And if there's a breakdown, it's a team. So it's not someone pointing at somebody else saying it was loaded wrong, or they're going to win together, or they're going to learn together. So we do try to do that in all the different facets, making sure that the stores understand what contributing margins are and to profitability, and areas where they're maybe a little bit lacking. And to your point, it just comes down to constant communication.
Okay. And Mark, you had talked right off the beginning about the SWOT analysis was not just the top doing it. You talked about having, other members of the team. So you also agree that is that one of the secret sauces here, is making sure that everybody understands not only what their role is, what their stake is, and what's happening?
Well, we talk about, fixed versus variable costs and how we can reduce those things. And it's also, all of those come with unique challenges. And for me, Reed kind of hit on it, and it got me thinking here, is that for us, it was services. So we provide a lot of services. We've been, since 1966, we've been, our customers have got accustomed to a certain level of service. And I realized when we first started looking at this, we hadn't raised our delivery rates in 15 years, right? And we weren't charging for in-home relocations and to conduct haulaways, and we were really loose on restocking fees, and this was kind of a cornerstone of our company. But now we realized, as we cinched our belts down, that these things were costing us a significant amount of money. So we were able to kind of reaffirm those things, and it's amazing how customers weren't as opposed to these changes as we, for some reason, told ourselves they would be. We're like, customers they'll throw a fit if we raise our local fees to $99, or if we charge them to, but to me, I always like to say that price is only an issue in the absence of value, and getting the sales associates, the managers, and the delivery teams to understand how to articulate, here's why you're paying $99 to have us take your old stuff away, is because, and also I would look at another thing, just in regards to that is, say we're relocating furniture in customers' homes, we were causing consequential damage on something that old stuff we're taking away, and customers are trying to get reimbursed for those things. And so I was able to put some, a liability clause in there. We made some changes like that to really cut cost.
And Reed, I'm hearing a lot of really attention to minute detail here as well. How important do you think that is?
It's incredibly important, and there's something Daniel talked about with sort of the differentiation that they provide, like having the wine bar. But I think that differentiated service that goes across all of your business, and it's in the details where it shows, and that's where you can, ways that you can drive revenue or retain customers or keep the business growing. It's those things you do beyond just closing the sale.
So I'm going to go a little bit granular, and I'm going to kind of take us to 30,000 and then back down in the weeds, because so much of this is there's just so many things I wanted to cover today. So Daniel, let me ask you, whenever we talk about profitability, and it was interesting, I remember distinctly that one of the first webinars that we did after the pandemic hit, and we really had, my God, we were trying to figure out anything we could to help businesses survive. And this was before PPP came out and all that kind of good stuff. But it was the attention to cash flow. And admittedly, there were a number of our members, business owners, that never paid much attention to that. So let's pause switch on that subject right out of the gates and just ask you that question. So how important is cash flow management still today and moving forward? Can you talk a little bit about how that fits in, to all of this as we try to piece this all together?
Sure. So cash flow, I start my morning with it. My financial team sends out a up-to-date cash flow, and it's an amazing model. I'm assuming many people on the phone, many businesses have their own variation of it. Ours includes every KPI imaginable. It's a summary of where we are to the day. It's got a big picture that goes 5 years out. It's got every check that's been issued and cashed, and the day it was cashed. So, in those early years, my company's 12 years old now. In those early years, cash flow was a necessity to know if we were going to be able to survive, and never missed a check, never bounced one. But we were able to see around the corners and see what we needed to do to maybe trip some of the levers to be able to control cash going into another quarter, or in those early years, another day or another week. But it's really essential. It's always important to not only understand where you are right now, but where you're going to be. As Reed was talking about, or maybe it was Marcus, some of these expenses that we all have, when you're able to take at cash flow in a big picture, call it a 5-year outlook, and you could see something as simple as cost of living increases, what 3%, 5%, 8%, 2% is going to cost. My company is up to 315 employees. So what does that look like 4 years from now? Where will the top line potentially be? And by having a good cash flow model where you could add, subtract, change things around, it's pretty interesting to see how a couple of tweaks and adjustments can positively or negatively impact where we're going to be a week, a month, a quarter, or several years from now.
And before I move on from you on this one, so you really want to see it every day. That's interesting to me, because not everybody is on that kind of a cycle, but you're saying that you want to know real time each day where you are, even on the 5 year, et cetera. You want to have that at your fingertips.
Every single day I start out with it. It's because I think what we're discussing here is having a high level of curiosity. So pick any subject, pick marketing expenses, advertising, and then rent increases, salary, whatever it might be. So to be able to drive into a different vertical and see what happens when things are increased or decreased, and how that's going to flow through, just sort of sets my mind up to start asking the right questions. So if I know I'm going to be in a marketing meeting first thing in the morning, or logistics, or store meeting, or business development, whatever it is, just being able to play around with those cash flows, because it's all going to affect that. If we're doing a big initiative, we expect a certain result is going to come from it. And what happens if it doesn't? Is it money that we're still willing to commit to renovate a design studio or increase an ad spend? So we've got to be, we always take a look at it. What happens if it works, and what happens if it doesn't? And sometimes you have to play this might not work for a few times. So let's keep at it and see how that's going to impact the business.
Yeah, and Mark, this is interesting because that's a level of agility that Daniel's talking about. That's pretty. That might be really intense for some people to be sort of in the midst of it every single day. But what are your thoughts about that as well, as far as monitoring that cash flow, and how important of a metric is that for you?
Well, for us, it's been especially challenging, given that, it took a while for us to recover from pandemic purchasing. We consider, we're a stocking dealer, and so we buy at scale. And, during the pandemic, we were bursting at the seams, to the point where we had to get portable storage containers in our parking lot to hold all this product. And then trends change, or, obviously shipping costs go down, and these have a significant effect on our cash flow. And one thing that we've done, the focus right now, is kind of trying to, and it's the hardest thing is with our customer expectations, is to become less of a stocking dealer. Although we still have a large distribution center, we're trying to get our sales associates more accustomed to relating, to their customers, that the manufacturers are shipping more consistently, and these delays aren't long, but people still have such a hangover that's been a real challenge, getting people to wait a week and a half, even though you tell them a week and a half and they still think they're going to wait 6 months.
Right. Well, it wasn't that long ago that 6 months was like, oh, wow, I can get it that soon. You remember, that was no joke. Reed, some comments from you looking at this, because both of your fellow panelists here have clearly they're very connected to this cash flow number, because it really does speak to the ebbs and flows. What else are you seeing out there as far as attention to this particular metric?
Well, I was just going to say, there's a business I visited where on the wall they had written "Cash don't lie," and I think, just speaks to the criticality, importance of cash flow, and how important that is.
They don't win the grammatical award, but that's beside the point.
But I think it's more about getting the point across, which is, everybody needs to be conscious of cash, and it's, at the end of the day, if you've got to have cash to be solvent. I think what we've kind of in the space we're in, which is in the financing space, we hear this a lot from retailers as well. We're trying to do as much as we can to serve those needs. So one is how fast we can provide funding, so that even a day can make a difference. The second is when issues arise, or there's damaged goods, or customer wasn't happy, how can we resolve that issue so there's not a return, so that even a small reduction in returns helps. So looking for things that we can do that help on the cash flow side, even if they're small things that can help a business manage their cash more effectively.
And Daniel, I want you to respond to an example that Mark gave, because this is interesting. So we talked about just the cost of goods, right? Just the container aspect of what this has done for retailers has been nuts, right? Because we went from here to here to here, all over the place. So you've got a mix of goods in a warehouse that came in with all different shipping costs tied to it. That seems to be the commercial for what you just said about the cash flow, because you could have, as those on a daily basis, if those container prices take a dip, you could, as you like to sort of mess with those numbers, plugging these things in. Is that a good example of how you can at least get a better idea of what you might be up against, and then maybe adjust to it?
There's nothing that's going to happen within the four walls or on the road that a good cash flow shouldn't take into consideration. Cost of goods and container prices that's sunk into the cost of goods and transportation. So certainly there's lots of upside there. The furniture industry got very good at tacking on surcharges and raising prices. That happens quickly, doesn't unwind so quickly. So I think we're all starting to recognize the normalization of the process now.
Okay. So as we talk about, before we leave the cash subject, and Mark, I'll start this one with you. Always get this question. People are always asking, what are the best ways to preserve cash? So now we know kind of the flow here. How would you respond to somebody that asks you, says, Mark, what's the best way for me to preserve cash in my business?
Well, for us, and I think it's maybe different for every retailer, for us, it's order management primarily, because a lot of our cash is going to paying invoices on shipments. And one thing we got used to during the pandemic was take it or they're going to give it to somebody else, and that's all cash is flying out the door. Now we're really looking through our open orders and going through them with a fine-tooth comb to eliminate things that we no longer need, checking to see things that maybe we're buying at scale that we don't have to, and just adjusting orders much more proactively to preserve cash so that we can pay our bills and maintain that working capital. We talk, working capital is something that we kind of talk about. And often I've noticed for us is we didn't always know what all of our fixed costs were to the finest detail. And right now we're going through and really micro-analyzing what our fixed costs are and seeing where we can reduce. A lot of things being like, what kind of capital improvements do we need to make now, or can we forecast that stuff or push it out a little bit? And I want to say one thing before you move from me, Mark, is something that Reed said, and I just wanted to double down on it, is he talked about a second trip. He talked about damages in regards to delivery. And this is something that we have found to be very useful, is we put a policy in place that if a delivery if a truck is at a customer's house and they identify damages, they have to engage that store manager or the sales associate while on scene, because what happens is, we can often find a solution while they are there, and either buy that customer out or do something to eliminate having to have that second delivery, because we had gotten so accustomed to deliveries are free, right? It doesn't really cost money, even though we're subsidizing every time that truck leaves the distribution center. So that was just something I wanted. It's paid off, and it takes a little bit more time in regards to internal communication, but it pays off big time.
And one thing I just want to harp on one thing there that you said too, though. The first thing I thought about, and I get what you're talking about operationally, I understand that part of it too. But what I love about that is what that says to the customer. We're gonna rectify this now. I'm not gonna have somebody call you later. I mean, there's that responsive piece in there too that I think is a real great boost to the brand. I mean, I'm just throwing that one out there, but I don't think that hurts from that customer side either. I think I would feel like, oh wow, they want to get this figured out now for me. And I think there's power in that.
And fuel, you can't forget about fuel, because I'm sure everyone here, I mean, fuel is such a
going back and forth. Yeah. Okay.
Mark, I was gonna add one more thing, and this is
Oh.
easier said than done, but it's so important when you can to line up, whether it's working capital needs, bank lines of credit, your cash flow when times are good, because when times are bad, it is so hard to then go in and the bank that would said yes to you 6 months ago is not, well, you can see how things change so fast. And I know that's easier said than done, but sometimes when you don't need it, that's the time to really lock those things in place, because when you really need it, it can be very challenging.
Well, this is what we talked about offline before we started here, is that Daniel and his company had kind of an emergency battle plan together from when they had a huge issue with a hurricane. And that becomes your, the book that you pull out. And that wasn't planned as it was happening. That was after the fact. Like, how do we learn from this? And Daniel, I think that's, while this is not exactly the same thing, I feel like you all three are saying one thing that I need to sort of put a little spotlight on, is that all that we talk about here, whether it's cash flow, profitability, whatever, is that it's got to be cultural. Right? I mean, if you're going to involve everybody, this has to be something, from the top down. And Daniel, you're a great example. It's like you're putting that attention to detail. So isn't there a part of this that gets down to leadership as well? That's a huge, part, maybe the soft skill part of this that we've not yet addressed. Daniel, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I consider myself incredibly fortunate. We have exceptional management in all locations who understand the big picture. And being the retail mind, oftentimes the retail mind is, I want to make a sale and let's see where the sales are at the end of the day. And if you ask any of the managers on my team, what my favorite 5 most important aspects of the business are, and these are in order, so you might want to take notes. It's cash, 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 and cash. So it's trying to get the managers to understand. Sure, it's wonderful to have a $250,000 in sales in any given day, but if there's no cash behind it, maybe it's just a lag over from a sale we made previously. It's changing that mindset. Of course, the sales are super important. We all want to pay attention to them, but let's try to drill down into the details and see how everything is connected. What Mark was saying about trying to fix the situation instead of doing what our industry is good at doing and apologizing and going back again and again and again. It's addressing an issue as soon as it comes up. It's for us, we're really focused this year on taking our technology side of the business to where I think our branding and sales efforts are. So, last year our big challenge was logistics. We all went through what Mark was talking about, having dozens of trailers sitting in the yards. And in our circumstances, we were in a tough situation. We had 3 different warehouses with 1 management team overseeing them. And that was just a result of some expansion and growth. And we weren't allowing the backside of the business to keep up with the front side. So we've addressed that this past year, and now we get to take on the challenge of all things technology as we go into to next year.
We're going to dig into tech in a little bit too as well, but Reed, I'm going to skip to you on this one as a follow-up in what you've seen as well. What would you say are the leadership qualities that are the most critical for really navigating through these different times and all these processes we're talking about? Because I just hear in Mark and in Daniel so much leadership that it's coming down from here.
Yeah, I think for the things we're talking about, some of these really core business fundamentals, I think leading by example is probably the most important, which is if you're modeling, we're going to be cost conscious in all these areas, but as a leader, you're not doing that yourself, then that sets a bad example for everybody else. If you're talking about the importance of cash and cash flow, but again, you say one thing and do another. So I think leading by example, and then I think setting the culture, a culture that can work through this. Again, it's just so dynamic. So it's so difficult to plan right now. It's been just crazy going from COVID to where we are now. And so I think, a culture that's resilient and where everyone can see the long-term plans and goals and can pull together and hopefully ride out those challenging waves.
Yeah, I just had kind of, it was for a moment, it was an embarrassing moment because I responded in a way that probably was not appropriate in a very serious business meeting. But there was somebody that said, well, the new normal. And I almost spit up the coffee I had in my mouth. And I feel like this. And they're like, what's wrong? And I said, I've told everybody around me just to throw that phrase out of our language, because in this disruptive environment we're in, all these things going on, normal today is gone tomorrow. And so it's like, if you're looking for normal and figuring like you can sort of just ride it out, forget about it. And that's why this planning and all that we're talking about is so important, because everything right now is just so unbelievably dynamic. So Mark, let me ask you this question, because not every time, when you talk to a lot of people that we talk about, financial stability, they say, well, I'm fiscally conservative. Is being fiscally conservative enough? Because I hear that as a pushback. Somebody going, no, I've got this down because I'm fiscally conservative. Is that enough?
Wow, I guess I like to consider myself fiscally conservative, but it's one of those things where sometimes you don't know what you don't know. And for me, it's peeling back that onion a little bit. And, I'm an operator by trade. And so now looking at, when times were business was strong, I was fully employed. And now I'm having personally as an operator to step back and ask questions. What don't I know? What itches haven't I been scratching because I haven't had to? So it's just saying you're fiscally conservative is, to me, just probably a statement of ignorance, because you don't know what you don't know.
Fair. And that was kind of when I saw that as a question, and I was just like, that worries me a little bit. Because Daniel, I mean, what you're talking about with your successes in all of this is not about just being fiscally conservative, right? I mean, that's just a small piece of it.
Sure. Again, we've in Florida, I think many of us have had some really great years, and whether we continue to scale or not, it's being prepared. As we went through this COVID boom that our industry had, oftentimes you end up staffing up to the levels of the business that you're doing that day. So it's got to really take a look at it before you start adding overhead. Is this something that in a scorched earth scenario, or even realistically in a softer 2024, what does it look like? And we always, I mean, for us, we are not the company that's looking to slash and burn and kick people out. So when we add, it's okay in a softening through attrition, can we right size? And if the answer is no, we really need to take a critical look at that. And oftentimes we still might end up adding to that position, because I've always believed in adding just before it becomes really critical, not after.
Right. Gotcha. Appreciate that.
Hey,
Reed, let
Mark,
me ask you this. Yeah, go for it. Yeah, of course.
Well, I just because given hearing what Daniel said, and one thing I think that is a big enemy for someone that would be fiscally conservative is a fear of taking risk. Because right now, if I'm being financially conservative, but I'm not taking advantage of opportunities because I don't want to spend a dime, well, there's the bigger elephant that's gonna do that and just leave you in the dust.
Well, let's and Reed, I want you to pick up on that. And Mark, thanks for bringing that up. That's a really great point. Let's talk about this in these. Yeah, this is difficult times. We're trying to predict what's going to happen and keeping cash flowing and all that kind of good stuff. But let's talk about what Mark just said there for a second, and that is the thought process behind investing at these times, and really not closing the door on that, but really thinking about the future. Talk a little bit about that for us.
Well, I think, depending on such a great point, by the way, Marcus, about not being so conservative that you're not taking risks. I think depending on your risk tolerance, one way to get into that is by doing small tests. And I think finding a partner, whether it's a financing partner like us, or there's other think about your partner network, third parties you work with who can help share in the risk for that.
Okay.
Can help you try something. I'll give an example. One thing that we've been doing with a lot of retailers who don't do phone sales today is testing into phone sales. Simple thing, if they have capacity in their workforce to start doing outbound calling. And so we've been a part of a number of those tests. That's just one example, but I think whatever those ways that if something is then successful, then you can go bigger and turn it into a larger investment. But
and Reed, let me just understand this. Is it just front of the house, or are you also talking about small tests in any aspect of the business?
That's right. Any aspect. That's right. I think anywhere in the business, back of the house as well, technology. Where it makes sense, where you can do it without disrupting your existing business practices, et cetera.
So Daniel, how do you know then? I mean, I know we're asking I'm asking you all the unanswerable questions, but it's because we're friends. So how do you just help us out a little bit when you've made investment decisions in the last couple of tumultuous years? What was the scale tipper that said, you know what? Yeah, there's like Mark said, there's risk here. But what were the things that helped you make those investment decisions? Because I think a lot of people watching this are probably dealing with that on a regular basis as to when is the time to invest, even when times are difficult.
Sure. I think you've got to do analysis. You've got to put your educated guess out there on what the financial upside and downside is going to be on any endeavor. whether it's replacing equipment or expanding to a new market. But ultimately for us, it's once we've gone through all those exercises, it just comes down to gut. Anecdotally, we opened in Sarasota in 2022 because we saw what was happening with COVID, like most of us. We realized that in Florida and in the home space, there's winners and losers in every critical scenario, and our space was going to be in our state, and our industry was going to be one of the winners. So in the early days, looking for a reason, waiting for the right time, the right tea leaves to expand. 3 or 4 years ago, I would have said, well, let's wait until there's a slowdown in the market so we can get land a little more affordably, and we could move, because there's going to be ebbs and flows, there's going to be ups and downs. And what tipped the scale for us was just that moment in time that we didn't want to lose out on an opportunity, even though we knew that buying land was going to be affordable. But building in the age of COVID, we probably overpaid for just about everything, and that particular example worked out pretty well for us. We've got a strong market; it's scaling. We're now on comp year numbers, and the team there is doing exceptionally well. So there's a bit that was a big bet, and that paid off.
I was going to say it wasn't an easy decision to make. I mean, it's great that it paid off, but yeah, I mean, I get you, Mark. I see you doing a lot of nodding. You're relating to some of this that Daniel's talking about.
In a certain, to a certain extent, like for me, I mean, I appreciate his ability to expand. And for us, we did some mild expansion during the pandemic and capitalized on some market opportunities that we saw. But right now, I'm kind of adopting the good to great. We've realized there's a lot of things that we're doing, but we're not doing them great. Like online sales, like we've really taken a deep dive trying to improve our website and our ability to communicate through a third party, but we use Podium, and these things we're really great assets that we are kind of underutilizing. And now I go back to my first statement of maximizing every customer. So although I've definitely, we look at our market and then there's opportunity, but I saw one of the listeners even came in about we can't afford to lose any market share. We are digging into our, we've determined that 61% of our business are repeat customers, and that is one of our greatest assets. So we're really trying to dig into putting an anchor and a stake in our market share and not allowing someone else to come in and compromise that.
Okay. Awesome. Daniel, let me ask you this question. How
An easy one?
Yeah, this is better. Yeah, you'll be okay. How important have your vendor relationships been, or your selection of vendors through this, not just the past, but now in moving forward? How critical is that to your profitability as well? Because not every partner is made equal.
Yeah, when you bring up vendor relations, there's a number of things that go into it, right? So yeah, I think having for every retailer out there to have your core vendor program, there's certain things that we should all be asking for, and you've got to be a good partner. You can't ask. There's some people that ask and demand everything, but that's not necessarily being a good partner, whether it's floor sample discounts, co-op dollars, rebates. I mean, it's all very, very important. RA dollars. You get to a certain point, and it becomes somewhat difficult for a manufacturer to continue to keep giving and want to keep giving. But when I think about vendor relations, I think communications is always so vital. COVID was an interesting time where in the very beginning, no one really knew what was going on. And there's some companies that were really compromised and in a difficult way, and other companies were doing just fine. And one of our core top 10 vendors that we had, I tried to make it a point, I'm sure many of us did, where you just want to call people and you want to hear the sounds that are going to come out of their mouth, and you want to see how your team is doing and how other teams are doing. And yeah, one in particular, it took a good solid 2 weeks to hear back. No text, no phone call, no emails. And so what are you thinking in times of trouble? Okay, they must really be in trouble. So it turned out that it's a vendor that was doing just fine. It was just an individual who lacked the ability to properly communicate. Company's doing great. Company wasn't in any trouble, but now we in our meetings talking to our vendors, well, let's minimize brand X because there could be an issue. So that's an example, and I don't think I answered your question, but just to finish my thought, an example of how communications could be imperative, and lack thereof communications could be sending the wrong signals and having people make some pretty drastic changes to the way that they're approaching things, merchandising, vendor relations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, Reed, jump in because I think the spirit of the question, and Daniel, you did answer, but I mean, I think the spirit of the question is really that as you're talking about, your business being profitable, that, there's so many relationships that you have, whether it's with, your manufacturer suppliers, whatever it might be, any of your vendors, how critical it is to also make sure that part of your process is clean as well. Do you have some insights there too?
Yeah, I mean, I would hope that, we all challenge our vendors and our vendor partners to make sure they understand our business and our objectives. And that kind of talking about that communication that Daniel talked about is so critical, and it goes both ways, so that we're there. Hopefully you're getting asked some of those questions and you're responding. And then I think, I think I agree with you, Daniel, about challenging them, but I think, we should, part of our responsibility when we work with a vendor or partners is to challenge them a little bit. And to push, because especially when times are tough. So I think having a relationship where you can, feel comfortable challenging those vendors sometimes when you feel like you're not getting what you need.
Gotcha. I generally like to occasionally throw sort of toss-up questions out there. So I'll let you guys pick whoever wants to answer this question. A couple of good one-liner questions that came in from folks that are taking part in today's webinar. What's the number one wasted cost that you have found that was eliminated? So what was something that you might have found that was just like, that's a waste, it's got to go? Or maybe not.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that there's any wholesale eliminations of anything. There's, I think more realistically, it's just a reduction of things that might not be working. Yeah, I alluded to it earlier. Just because you try something and it doesn't work doesn't mean it's not going to work. We often, we call it whatever you want to call it, celebrate the failures, but sometimes you have to try things a handful of times, and we encourage our team to do that. If you try something so many times, 5, 6, 7, 8 times, and it's still not working, congratulations, you proved that you've exhausted every resource and energy and effort to prove that it doesn't work. And that's something that we try to celebrate. But to your point, if we feel there's redundancies or one of the verticals is not performing the way it should, it's just not necessarily cutting it out, but just taking a little bit of speed off the fastball and maybe redirecting it to something that is working.
Okay. Mark, any thoughts on
biggest
that?
waste, I would go back to services, as I talked about earlier. But for us, when it comes to, restocking fees, these delivery fees, cancellations, relocate, all these services we were providing at no cost, that we realized that was because we were having to subsidize deliveries. That's what I would go back, as that was our biggest area for increasing cash flow.
Gotcha. All right. Next question that came up. And this is asking, maybe this is an impossible question to answer, but it says, where can retailers find new incremental revenue opportunities to boost cash flow? So are there some, people are always looking for, what are some of those new things? Is there such a thing? And I'll throw that out to anybody that wants to jump in.
We've done a few things to this effect. We've tried to reach out more to realtor groups and become more part of their selling process. We've increased our home stagings, and we've had some luck with home selling with our staged product. So we've invested in that quite a bit.
You know, I'll
Yeah,
add
Mark.
someone in the. Oh, go ahead, Daniel.
Please.
I was going to say someone in the financing space. You know, we one of the things that we've been doing is trying to work with retailers to leverage financing in their marketing as a way to spend a lot on marketing spend. We can increase ROAS by finding those kind of the right, most effective messages to weave in those financing offers, and we've seen that be really effective.
Okay, Daniel.
Yeah, I think if I've got a reputation of something, it's probably being on the sales and the marketing side of things. That's where we really start getting excited. And what Mark was talking about are things that we've always appreciated. We're rolling out a couple of new verticals. I guess to answer the question is take a look at what your business is doing well and what air there is to be able to create some sort of new venture. Whether it's design fees, staging, in-store events, taking advantage of some logistics upside that you have to be able to support the independent design trade. I mean, there's so many things outside of the client walking in the front door and sitting on something and buying it that we consider ourselves really good at doing is really going beyond that just that initial sale. Model merchandising has always been a big one for us. I just left one of my showrooms. We were having a luncheon for a country club, bringing them in and giving them a little bit of, I mean, listen, it's just 30 people who wanted to come in and eat something and drink something. So we gave them a little bit of education on different styles of the showroom, and sold a couple of pieces and got some house calls out of it. So there's when I say find something where there's space, we had time today. We had capacity to be able to bring 30 people into one of our showrooms and try to give our sales and designers an opportunity to be successful. And you sort of keep going with those ideas, right? So getting 30 people to show up, whether they're realtors or the building industry or clients or some sort of charitable organization is great. So that's your start. I think just doing something and not seeing how you can make that 30 people more impactful. This is just, again, somewhat anecdotal, but if you know the 30 people that are coming in, let's get our designers, and you're not ever going to get full participation, but to know that there's an event that's about to happen at your showroom, to know who's coming in, to then engage the designers and give them a little form letter to send out. And, hey, Mark, my name's Daniel. You're going to be coming into the showroom. I'm going to be your point of contact. Maybe you get a little bit of a response, but now Mark has Daniel as a contact. And I'm telling you, when Mark replies and Daniel gets that email, now you've got designers who are engaged in that event and they feel good about knowing that someone's there, as opposed to just simply standing at the front door and saying hello and welcome when they come in. So it's giving people, again, just to close the loop on this one, taking that idea, taking those things that we've been doing and say, how could that idea that's working, how can we make it work 5x? What can we do to make sure that there's going to be more engagement on the end user and more engagement on our internal clients, our sales team?
And I love that, and always thinking about something in the scalability, right? Not make it all one and dones, but how can we scale this kind of situation? Reed, were you going to say something?
I was also just going to add, I loved what Marcus shared earlier, which is looking at some of the services you provide. We may be undercharging for those, where if there's perceived value and that value exceeds kind of what you think you can charge for it.
Okay, and thinking about that under the context of this question as a revenue opportunity. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, and I'll add some of what Daniel said, because I call it kind of my capture the customer initiative. But it is we have these customers come in and we've realized that we were doing a poor job of documenting that customer and then following up throughout the course of the relationship. And what we've incorporated is a follow-up agreement that they can use. The customer comes in, they'll just simply ask the customer, I understand you didn't purchase something today. Do you mind if I keep working for you and see if I can find something that would better suit your needs? The customer gives them the information. We require they enter that. They get their first follow-up has to be within 72 hours. And what we've realized, it's circular, because whoever had the most BBACs have the highest close ratio. And so I ran a contest. Every salesperson with the most follow-up agreements had the most beebacks and the highest close ratio in the whole company. And we call it the success rate, which is something that I learned about at HFA at Market. But it's something that I've really doubled down on, and it's been very, very fruitful for us.
Wow. A shameless plug for HFA at Markets. I love that. Yes. Yes, Mark. So I'm glad you said that, because we have amazing resource centers in High Point and in Las Vegas where you can learn all sorts of great seminars and stuff. I'm sorry, I had to use the shameless plug, but thank you for that. I appreciate it. Daniel, you earlier had used the word technology. Are there, this was a question that kind of came up also, is that are there technologies that that retailers should be embracing that truly will impact profitability, et cetera? Are there certain things you think are just really key technologies that are working out there right now?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've never been a big believer or fan of augmented reality, but virtual reality is something that we've always embraced. We have over a dozen CAD operators on our team. That also includes the VR that we're doing in-house. But there's programs out there like Floor Planner that allow a designer in the home to do a 2D plan, and Floor Planner has the ability to turn that into, it's not incredibly sophisticated, but it can create a 3D rendering, which is pretty impressive, and it's quick and it's intuitive. Tracking, I tell you, a big one for us right now is Dispatch Track. There's lots of programs out there to be able to keep track of drivers. Stores find it very useful to know where the next stop is going to happen. And that's good. It's always good. It's not the reason that we ended up leaning into that program. The genesis of adopting a program like that is we've got the best delivery drivers, bar none. And for my Florida friends out there, I apologize if you take that as an insult, but our guys are incredible. Now, they're not going to be able to be on a truck for the rest of their lives. And part of the reason that we wanted to go with the program, aside from the tangible value of documenting issues or knowing where the routes are going to be, is it's giving them a set of skills. It's taking someone who maybe has never used an iPad professionally before and teaching them something that's definitely going to be transferable. So the day they decide they can't physically run on a truck anymore, at least they've got a base level of some computer training that could help them transition to another position in my company or anyone else's. And I think that's kind of an obligation that we should all have as owners of our company or leaders of our company, is to give people a reason to stay, but make sure that when they leave, they're going to be better equipped to continue to elevate their careers or paychecks in someone else's company.
I love it. How would you, Mark, how would you answer the what technology can have the impact on your profitability? Are there certain technologies that you're utilizing that have really helped the bottom line?
Absolutely. And one thing that we realized, that we were underutilizing the technology we already had. Dispatch Track and Podium, work seamlessly with Profit and our website. And we've been able to capitalize on some opportunities. Specifically, one thing that I realized was happening is a lot of our sales associates were communicating with customers on their personal devices. Well, that's great, except for managers and myself and other people in the organization can't oversee these conversations and add value. And I've realized now, since I've bought more iPads and got everyone to use the app on their phones or company phones. And now we can oversee these interactions, and we're able to convert a lot more customers that way. We also utilize Dispatch Track now to do our reviews and a survey after delivery. And when we recently turned on texts, so the customers are getting text messages and they can interact with our dispatch desk on the day of delivery. And these were always things that were available. We just were underutilizing them. So there's just a lot of really, really awesome tech, but it takes patience. And you need to have someone that's driving that, because a lot of the time it's easy to say, turn that on, but there's no one that's really there managing that change. So
somebody's got to own it. Okay. Reed, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I would echo what Marcus was saying about some of those customer communication channels, especially your mobile game is just so critical now. I mean, even in our own sort of business, we recently turned on text messaging for marketing, and it's probably double the performance of email. The other thing I would say is looking at those technologies you're not using, and if they, taking a hard look, and if you don't need them, I think it's okay to say goodbye. And even if there's not a lot of costs involved, there is a cost in managing that relationship or training people or everything that goes with that. So that's another area that you can look for cost cutting.
Well, listen, I mean, the technology we're talking about, not just building on the revenue side, right? If it's something that's a drag on the expense side, you got to realize that as well, right? I mean, no doubt about it. That's a wonderful point. Daniel, there's actually a specific question that came for you. It says, how does Daniel get his cash flow reports? Is it a customized technology, or is it from your POS, or people want to know in that daily that you get where it comes from?
Yeah, it's something. My CFO is like Jimi Hendrix on a spreadsheet. So it's an Excel file, and it's updated every single day, and everything our financial model feeds into the cash flow, and it all plays off each other. So literally every day it's updated. It's an arduous process, but one that's so incredibly valuable to know to a penny where we are currently. Those very early years, what was in the float versus what's in the bank account. Luckily, we're a decade past needing to worry about that, but it's something that my CFO put together, and I think the document has a dozen tabs, and those dozen tabs are tied into our financial spreadsheets, which has another dozen tabs or so.
So if he's Jimi Hendrix, then who are you?
The bald guy. I don't know.
Oh man. I love it. So let me, here's another question that came through. We've got a little bit of time left here, just a couple of minutes. And I'm not sure if this is answerable or not, but it's a number of people asked about tax breaks. Are there any overlooked, underutilized tax breaks that business owners should be aware of that maybe you guys have discovered? And Marcus, I'll start with you. If that's even answerable, maybe it's not.
Well, for us, I mean, we're in California, and electric vehicle emissions taxes is a really big one that should be paying attention to, especially if you're, I don't know, not all states utilize solar as much as us, but we've had a lot of success in, redoing roofs in conjunction with solar or electric vehicles, trying to be an early adopter of those things and reaping those benefits.
Daniel?
When you're putting your budgets together, just give yourself a very healthy reserve, and whether if you can choose to use that reserve to write off debt inventory, that's certainly an approach. Talk to your financial advisors. If you're following GAAP, they're going to tell you what you can and can't do. This weekend, our company is building, I think it's the 12th home for Habitat for Humanity. I mean, that's a very, very small way to put some money out there into the community. A lot of it ends up coming back. Most importantly, we're supporting our local community, and it's really a lot of fun to go out there and see that wall get raised. But
I love it. I love that. I love it. And, no, and the thing to tie together something you said a little bit ago too, is that also, and I didn't think about the 501c3 aspect of this and being, some store philanthropy, things like that, but also those events in store can be charitable as well. I mean, there's ways to meld a lot of that together too. And I didn't mean to walk on you. I would let you finish what you wanted to say.
Oh, I'm making this up as I go along, so I appreciate the interruption.
That's why we love that you're here. Reed, any final thoughts on any tax thoughts on that, if you have any? I'm just curious.
No, I'm not a tax professional, and I don't play one on TV, so I won't add any. But I think those are both great suggestions from Marcus and Dean.
I love it. I have to just say that the thing that I think has been so outstanding about today's webinar is that each of you, and Daniel and Marcus in particular, as retailers, have really given specific examples to how you do these things and the way that you think. And so I think the takeaways have been huge. So, man, this hour went like that. I want to thank our guest today, Daniel Lubner, CEO of Clive Daniel in Florida, Mark Evans, COO of Evans Furniture Galleries, and Reed Bork, the CRO at Catapult. Gentlemen, this has been great. A reminder that you can find this, of course, on demand myhfa.org/webinar. As always, I'd like to wish you not only good sales, but good health. I'm Mark Schumacher. On behalf of all of us at HFA, we will see you next time.